Alrighty, it is time. It is time to look at the Slayer tree. I didn't really know what to expect. They said it was going to be execute themed. I've read into it a little bit, but realistically, I'm cracking open Dr. Pepper Zero here. Something to really consider is with the past couple that we have, those past couple hero talents, you look at Mountain Thane, you can say, oh, it could fit in there. You look at Colossus and you go, oh, I mean, I guess they could just move up Shockwave, you know. I guess they could just move Shockwave up and give us Stormbolt baseline, and maybe that'll just be it. Well, not anymore. The idea and the put forth here of Bladestorm for Fury really changes a lot of how I feel about what these talents are going to be and how much of an actual potentially full rework we're getting comparatively to the to how it previously was, where we thought maybe it's a talent reworked, a little shuffle around. No, this feels and sounds way more of a rework to me, especially considering the talents that we have in the tree. So, we'll start with the dev note here, which is where a lot of this came from. Fury will have access to Bladestorm via specialization talents in the world within. Okay, is that going to be class baseline, or is that going to be in the Fury talent tree? It says via specialization talents. So to me, that says that is the Fury specialization talents. But if they're going to give us Bladestorm, realistically, this is an idea or something that Archimetros in the Skyhold Discord was talking about, which makes sense to me, that they're essentially just going to kill Ravager for Fury. And I'm kind of fine with that. I liked Ravager, but Ravager was always kind of weird. You needed to cast it at a spot, it chased targets. Depending on where you started it, sometimes it wouldn't follow the target correctly, you would lose value. So not having Ravager and having Bladestorm for Fury instead sounds really interesting, right? Sounds pretty cool. So let's go through these. I need to make sure my big stupid face isn't blocking them. No, we're good. So first and foremost, these start off the top. Slayer's Dominance. Your attacks have a high chance to overwhelm your target's defense and trigger a Slayer's Strike, dealing low damage and implying marked for execution. One thing I wonder if this Slayer's Strike does add rage. I'm assuming it's just going to be like a yellow attack, something like Main Gosh from Rogue as an example, where it just hits. But you're probably not going to get extra Fury from it, or extra rage from it. And applying marked for execution, increasing the damage they take from your next execute by 10%. Stacks 3 times. Okay. I'll be honest. In terms of how these classes are working, we are what seems like to be getting some form of a rework or a reshove or something, right? As it stands, if they keep a lot of how some of these classes work, when I look at this tree and I think about arms in specific, I don't necessarily like how it seems we're stacking martial prowess procs for 50% more mortal strike damage. We're getting percent damage from execute through Ashen Juggernaut, percent damage to mortal strike through Executioner's Precision, and now we're getting another percent damage increase from execute, as well as this for this for arms being execute centric seems really good, but at the same time, you're thinking about, oh, well, it's execute, and then we look down here and we see sudden death's chance to reset the cooldown of execute, make it usable on any target regardless of health. So you go, okay, cool. Well, there's sudden death, and now sudden death's better, but are they going to get rid of Test of Might? Because sudden death doesn't feed and proc into Test of Might. I mean, sudden death's a good button. Execute's a good button. With this, execute's even a better button. But the fact that Test of Might doesn't work with sudden death procs kind of sucks. So think about it that way. But I'm thinking about this mainly from a Fury standpoint, not an ARM standpoint just yet. So let's go into this other one, right? First point. Sudden Death's chance to reset the cooldown of Execute, make it usable on any target regardless of health. Using Sudden Death accelerates your next Bladestorm, striking one additional time, max 3. Bladestorm's total duration is unchanged. Now, hear me out, right? Hear me out. Bladestorm through arms is affected by anger management, and if we get Bladestorm as a capstone talent, that would just simply replace something like Ravager. If it was just a one-to-one replace and when you just popped it in there. I'm not sure exactly how many procs of Sudden Death we're going to get, because this Sudden Death proc also reminds me of the Season 1 Fury tier set for Dragonflight, where it's just, hey, your Sudden Death procs more often. That's just what it was, and now that's just what this is. It is the Fury tier set from Vault of the Incarnates. But using Sudden Death accelerates your next Bladestorm, striking an additional time. Max 3, Bladestorm's total damage is unchanged. So how many Sudden Death procs are we realistically going to get by the time we get Bladestorm? And if we're playing Fury, we're going to have a lot of rage that we're spending. And if we play Fury and we have anger management, and that anger management goes into Bladestorm, we might be Bladestorming a lot, which is kind of interesting and helps with AoE, because I'm also thinking about, oh, well, what about Mythic Plus? What about AoE? What about this? What about that? That sounds interesting, but here we have Overwhelming Blades, the next talent point. Each strike of Bladestorm applies Overwhelm to all targets affected, increasing damage taken by 1% for 10 seconds. Now, here is where we need to have a small discussion. Here is where we need to think about this a little bit. Because as you'll see later in the tree, I have a problem with this. I'll bring it up later. When we get to it, I'll have a problem with this. If this is affects all enemies affected, increasing damage by 1% for 10 seconds, if that is a debuff that stacks and refreshes, now we have a problem. That's a problem to me, if this stacks and refreshes. Personally, from the way it looks, I would rather this be, hey, every time this shit ticks, you just get 1% increased damage for 10 seconds, and then that just, every tick increases that 1% for 10 seconds, but it doesn't stack, it doesn't increase the duration. It's just every stack has its own duration, is how I would like this to be. And I'll explain why once we get down to this Frenetic Flurry talent here. Next, over here, we have Relentless Pursuit. Charge removes all movement impairing effects and grants you 70% move speed for 3 seconds. So that is just Heroic Leap move speed, but now charge, and we might still have 2 charge casts. That's really, really good. This is probably more of a PvP-centric talent. Heroic Leap reduced the cooldown of charge by 5 seconds, and charge reduced the cooldown of Heroic Leap by 5 seconds. This is pretty interesting, and depending on how you use it, you can actually generate a lot of extra rage by leap charging. Let's say depending on what build we're going to have, what the talent tree looks like, how everything fills out right, leaping away from a target and then charging back in, which would give us a decent amount of rage, and then we can leap away from the target mid-global and then charge back in and maybe not lose a full global, might be decent. But I don't want it to be good enough that it's super degenerate where you're constantly just leap charging. It just feels like a little bit of extra utility. The move speed on charge feels a little better. I don't really know how I feel about Vicious Agility. Maybe this is the more PvP-centric one. But I think both these talents are decent. It goes with the Slayer theme. It's the Relentless Pursuit, right? The Relentless Pursuit. Now we have Death Drive. You heal for 50% of your target of the damage dealt by Sudden Death. Alright, that's just more survivability. Way better for arms. Fury doesn't really need it, at least not right now. But depending on the changes, yada yada yada, right? So now we have Slayer's Reflexes. Slayer strikes have a chance to reset the cooldown of Bloodthirst and Overpower. Slayer strikes is the high chance to overwhelm your target's defenses, yada, and that it's this. So now it just has a chance to reset the cooldown of Bloodthirst and Overpower. Here's where I feel like this is interesting. Arms cooldown is reduced. Fury cooldown is reduced of Overpower and Bloodthirst. Okay, that seems kind of weird to reduce the cooldown of Bloodthirst. It's already pretty low, right? Like, why do we need 10%? 10% is nothing. Let's think about it a little bit. Tunnel vision. Your auto attack speed increases when you are in combat. Changing targets resets this effect. I personally, maybe on like big single target bosses where you don't have to change anything, or you can just cleave off a primary target. This is going to be cool. I do like talents like this, but I still don't like the idea of currently with Frenzy as an example that we just lose haste because we need to primarily swap damage to another target. I don't really like that. But something like this might be too broken, depending on how much attack speed you get. If it's good. Realistically, what it's probably going to come down to is depending on the proc rate of this, I'm assuming something like Thrill of the Kill is probably going to be maybe a little better in dungeons because you're going to be able to guarantee you just get that auto attack speed steroid, kind of like currently as Fury, we get the steroid from Dancing Blades. But even in a Mythic Plus scenario where we're constantly swapping targets, depending on the actual damage value of this, being able to set a primary focus target and then also having extra boss damage if this auto attack speed is good enough, these still might be taking tunnel vision, which I personally don't mind. I don't mind. I'm someone that likes passive effects. I like it when 2 passive trinkets are my bis. So honestly, I don't mind either of these. Realistically, it's just no matter what you're doing, you're going to get some more attack speed. One thing I do find weird is because it's so attack speed centric, and this is attacks as well, I'm not really sure if they're going to push for, depending on how they change the Fury tree, a more Annihilator style of play. I don't know if they prefer that or Raging Blow. The thing that you notice here is Raging Blow isn't listed at all for Slayer, even though it is a centric talent for it. Currently, Raging Blow is listed for Mountain Thane, which they might relook at. But I think if you're playing this build, and because we're talking about auto attack speed, this might recontextualize what this build is, and we might be looking at an Annihilator specific build for Slayer if we keep that talent. If there's a lot of ifs here, right? So we're just speculating. But I think that's also kind of interesting for people that like that. Next, we have Slay. Marked for execution increases the critical strike chance and critical strike damage of your next execute on the target by 5%. Okay, I mean, it is just more execute damage. All right, cool. Frenetic Flurry. Overpower Arms and Bloodthirst Fury have a chance to cause you to unleash a brief Bladestorm, striking all enemies around you at once. You can now use Pummel and Stormbolt while Bladestorming. This part is really cool. And it means that if you're Bladestorming a lot, like as part of your rotation, it's not going to negatively impact you in like dungeons or PvP. Or if you're Bladestorming and you still need to kick a spell, it's not free if you're Bloodstorming and the spell just goes off. Or you can't kick something. Because what I'm assuming is they may change Ravager for Bladestorm, but if we keep the Hurricane talent, Bladestorm is not going to be a cancelable ability. So if Bladestorm is not a cancelable ability, then you need to be able to do kicks with that. So this is cool. And potentially running a, depending on how the talent setup works for arms, running a double Bladestorm setup with Hurricane, if we keep it, might feel a bit better knowing we can actually crowd control the mobs that we're designated to without feeling like we can't press our buttons because we need to wait to kick our mob. Now here we have Slayer's Focus. Overpower cooldown reduced, Bloodthirst cooldown reduced. Okay. And then here's the final cap. When you execute a target that you've marked for execution, reduce the cooldown of Bladestorm by 5 seconds per stack of marked for execution, and apply stacks of Overwhelmed equal to the number of stacks of marked for execution the target had. These two talents here and Overwhelming Blades seem like the major parts of this tree, and the one thing that I'm kind of worried about. Because what this can fall down to is a incredibly degenerate style of play, potentially, where all you're doing is trying to refresh this Overwhelming Blades increased damage, and just because I'm assuming this stacks, right? I'm assuming this 1% increase stacks. What I want this is every time you get this, the stack goes and every stack falls off every 10 seconds, right? But depending how everything works, you could have your Bladestorm could stack it up. You could be holding execute procs at the end of it to try and wait and hit to, and you want to hit and execute procs. You're gonna pop the Slayer's dominance marks, so you're gonna keep the stack of overwhelming blades up. While you're doing that, maybe you hit a Bloodthirst, and then the Bloodthirst does the little brief Bladestorm, striking all enemies around you at once, so then you have another stack. What I want this to be is you're just slamming buttons, right? I want you to be slamming buttons into this. What this has the possibility to be, depending on how Overwhelming Blades works, is you might literally just be playing maintenance mode with this Overwhelming Blades debuff in how you play. Because if you're running your management and you have this onslaught, unrelenting onslaught, and you're reducing the amount of cooldown, if this shit doesn't reset, imagine a fight, right? Imagine a patchwork-like fight where if your RNG is just perfect, you are doing potentially 100% increased damage to your target because you're able to keep these overwhelming blade stacks up, and you're getting good luck with your Bloodthirst crit, or your Bloodthirst hits that have a chance to release a Bladestorm hit, which gives the overwhelming blades and could reapply that that debuff for another 10 seconds. Then you get an Imminent Demise proc, and then you wait until about 8.5 seconds, so then you slam your execute finally just to keep this overwhelming blade shit up. That's what I don't want, right? I don't want it to be built and tuned around the fact that you could have a billion stacks of this damage amp, which I think would suck. What I want to happen is that you're just able to slam your buttons, and these stacks will just increase and decrease and apply and fluctuate and fall off, and then and then this tree is just balanced around doing a little extra damage all the time. That's what I hope it is. But I don't know if that's what it's gonna be. So we'll have to see on that. But the other thing to consider is, why do we have two talents that would reduce the cooldown of Bloodthirst? Bloodthirst is such a short cooldown that we do not need to reduce its cooldown by 20%. We simply don't. Why would we need to reset the cooldown of Bloodthirst when Bloodthirst is every other global anyway? Here's my theory on it, right? Here's my take on it. I have also read this take and idea I'm about to tell you from other people, right? I can't just say, oh, me, oh, idea, all me, I can't do that. But I'm assuming, and what I talked about before in some of my other, I don't remember which video it was, but I think they might be going back to making Bloodthirst a real button, right? A big button. Imagine Bloodthirst being a 10-second cooldown. That's a 10-second hasted cooldown that does some actual big damage. Imagine it's your primary ability instead of your secondary ability, right? Because if you're running any kind of Raging Blow build, it is going to be your big primary ability. If you're running, like, for example, Annihilator currently, Bloodthirst will be your primary ability because it's giving you cooldown with Odin's Fury, and you're getting crits through the Bloodbath proc. But I think they want Bloodthirst to really be a bigger and more centric button to Fury as a whole, and that's why you see the Bloodthirst cooldown here. I think Overpower already... I don't know if this is going to hurt Tactician, or how this will affect Tactician, or how Tactician's going to be. However, one thing I will say is there may be niche uses, but to me, as an overview of these trees, completely disregarding tuning, it really feels like Mountain Thane was built for Prot, Colossus was built for Arms, and Slayer was built for Fury. I mean, we even have a 4-piece Vault of the Incarnates tier set bonus as a talent point. a Fury talent of the Fury set from Vaulting the Incarnates, right? So these all just kind of feel like they're built for one or the other, which I think is fine because you can get some flavor and people can play, but it really feels like these really feel like they're built for their individuals, right? Because I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about, well, even they're mentioning his Fury specifically here. Well, I guess Mountain Thane doesn't have access. Some of the shit matters for Rot, but it feels very built for Fury. It really, really does. However, one thing that could be very interesting is based on the increasing execute damage that you're getting from these, depending on your attacks, if everything has a chance, you might just literally be slamming execute over and over again. And then Bladestorming, and you're decreasing the thing of Bladestorm, so you're getting, might be using Bladestorm in single target for arms, just to get these overwhelming strikes and these big, big, big chunky executes, right? All of these reduce the cooldown of overpower, but if they continue to keep tactician in, that these won't really be necessary. So this is probably why this might be the Fury talent, and then this might be the Arms talent. But the auto attack speed thing as well is kind of odd when you consider. I think it's kind of odd when you consider Arms because it doesn't really need additional rage generation. Maybe they'll tune back the rage generation because this auto attack currently with Impale our crits do more damage, and I think our auto attack critical hits gain us more rage. I don't think that's Impale specifically, but that is an Arms talent. But this looks cool, man. This looks really cool for Fury. I remember playing Signet of Tormented Kings, which was hit or miss, right? That thing could have done crazy damage. It could have been bad. But I remember playing Signet of Tormented Kings in Season 1 Shadowlands, and having Bladestorm as Fury was really cool, man. It's just really cool. So now we're getting executes, we're getting Bladestorms, we're getting a bunch of AoE damage. All of this is uncapped AoE if they keep Imagine if they do this, but then they just cap Bladestorm. Oh no. No, dude, I don't even want to think about it. I don't even want to think about that world. But this is really, really cool. I really like the direction of this compared to anything else because it's not too over the top, right? It's not crazy, but it's like, brother, you're gonna be doing more damage. You're gonna be slamming the execute button. You're gonna be Bladestorming. That Bladestorm is gonna apply a big damage taken increase, and you're gonna get more Bladestorms. I like it, right? It's like it is execute centric, and if we're able to get and if Fury and Arms both still have Hurricane and their Bladestorm is affected by anger management, this could be super, super interesting. But we'll have to see, because one of the things, it's so hard. I like speculating with what they could do and what they might change. I really like speculating, but it's so hard to like visualize what this is really going to look like and how it's going to feel until we actually see the talent tree, right? Until we actually see it. Because until we see the talent tree, none of this matters. The talent tree changes will completely affect how I feel about Mountain Thane, how I feel about Colossus, and how I feel about Slayer. I'll have to remake entire videos for every single one of them the moment we actually see a talent difference for the War Within. Because as it stands currently, so far, a lot of this stuff looks cool on paper, right? It looks cool on paper. I like the idea of it. Tunnel vision is great. I like it. But they've got a good track record with changing talents. We've got a real good track record of talent changes being great for the class. I need to see it to visualize this, right? And make everything fill in and just make sense and flow together, right? I want to see all of that come together. But I having a potential of what that could be by looking at what these talents are, looking at what they do, trying to really see what their idea is going into these. One thing I think is odd, however, um, for Fury specifically, I don't really see Rampage mentioned at all. Right? You go here, you look here, you can control F Rampage. And there's nothing, right? There's nothing in here about Rampage. And if we go into the Mountain Thane Warrior. Is there an infographic here? Where's the infographic, man? Ugh. But if we go into the Mountain Thane too, it's Lightning Bolts, Revenge, Raging Blow. Like, this build seems like it has a lot more things to do with Raging Blow. I mean, Bloodthirst and Rampage damage 10%. Once again, that Rampage damage increased by 10%. That's just another 2-piece tier set. I think that's the only time Rampage is listed. But here's the other thing. Lightning Strikes reduce the cooldown of Ravager in this talent tree here. So is Ravager and Bladestorm going to be a choice node? Because Fury is also between Prot and Fury can be Mountain Thane or Slayer. So it's still mentioning Ravager. I mean, maybe we just won't have it Ravager. Maybe this will just read something else. Lightning Strikes reduce cooldown of Bladestorm. I don't know. Maybe we still will have Ravager, but it is very interesting because I don't see them moving Bladestorm to the main tree because there's no real reason to give it to Prot. And it wouldn't make sense for Prot Warrior. But outside of this talent here, we see one for Ravager, one for Rampage. But most of it has to deal with the base kit of the classes, right? T-Claps, Bloodthirsts, Raging Blows, Executes, and now Bladestorm, I guess. But all this does is just make me want to think and ask more questions. And we just don't have the answers yet. We don't know. It looks cool. I like it. I really, really like it. I'm just going to go in circles if I don't end the video. So I'm just going to end it right here. But it just looks cool. But I just want to know what the talent tree looks like. I just need to see it. I need to be able to see it, and I just need to be able to build all of these specs with these hero talents in my mind. See what's going to be what. Do we still have Annihilator? Does that exist? Is Ravager still going to be in the Fury tree? And maybe not. I don't know. I just need to see it. But this is really this is great, honestly. I like this a lot, actually. Outside of the potential weird cheese, cringe, overwhelm, cheese bait, whatever, by just trying to keep this stack duration up, we'll see about that. But otherwise, I like it a lot. I like it a lot. I kind of grew on Colossus, and I should honestly take another look at Mountain Thane now that I have the consideration of all these different talent trees as well at some point. Alrighty. This lasted way longer than I expected to, but thank you for watching. Bye-bye.